Good evening, and welcome to the 14th annual Robert H. Guile QC Memorial Debate, which is being held for the second time in Allard Hall. If you don't know what that device I rang a moment ago was, you're too young. At one time,
I can hardly hear you.
Technology. All right, let me start all over again. Welcome to the 14th annual Robert H. Guile QC Memorial Debate, which is being held for the second time in Allard Hall, and welcome all of you. If you don't know what the device that I rang a few minutes ago was, you're awfully young. At one time, every school in the province had one of those before they invented electric buzzers. I'd like to introduce our panel of distinguished judges. First, the Honorable Lance Finch, Chief Justice of British Columbia. The Honorable Austin Cullen, Associate Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of British Columbia. Associate Chief Judge Michael Brecknell of the British Columbia Provincial Court. Bruce LaRose, QC of the Law Society of BC. Carrie Simmons from the BC QC of the BC branch of the Canadian Bar Association. Gerald Lacoven, QC, representing Small. You can sit down, Jerry. And Craig Dennis, representing Fraser Milner Casgrain LLP, the sponsors of tonight's reception. Now, I'd also like to welcome some special guests. Bob Guile's sister, Janet, who's here tonight with us with her husband, Gary McKenzie, and Bob's nephew, Stephen Morris, who is our official timekeeper. He has an annoying device that will let the debaters know when their time is up in more ways than one. I'd also like to recognize our Master of Ceremonies Emeritus, Wally Lightbody, who for the first 10 years of the Guile debate played this role. He's interrupted his life of tennis and golf to come down from Kelowna to join us tonight. I'd like to also just remember our longtime drummer, Wally Beck, who passed away a couple of years ago, and his successor, our drummer, Mike Berger, who's been doing this for a number of years. And I'd like to thank a few of the sponsors. I'd like to thank Fraser Milner Casgrain LLP, who are the very generous sponsors of tonight's reception, as they were last year. The enjoyment you will have is their hospitality and generosity. And thank you once again to FMC. I'd like also to thank Bullhauser and Tupper, who sponsor the reception for the tryouts. They did that last year in November, as they have for a number of years. Next year we'll have a guy with white gloves who can lead you. And I'd like to thank especially the Friends of Bob Guile, who 15 years ago set up the fund that endows the prize in Bob's memory. And we have I'd like to thank the Law Student Society, who also support this event tremendously, and particularly Claire Haff, who has worked on this, as well as Michelle Birchall, who has organized the food for this evening. Now, I'm very pleased to announce, through the generosity of the partners of Richards Buell Sutton LLP, that we have a new prize this year. It's a prize of $250 cash plus a trophy, and we'll talk about trophies in a minute, for the best debater. It doesn't go to the funniest debater, it doesn't go to the most boring debater, it goes to the best debater. So I'd like to thank the firm of Richards, Guile, Sutton, who are great supporters of the law school, and particularly for their sponsoring this prize. And of course, most importantly, we have to thank Liz Edinger, who organizes this, who whips the students into shape, organizes the tryouts, tries to give them a lesson in manners with varying degrees of success, and for many years now has brought all of this together. And without her work, there would be no debate. Yeah. Before the debaters come, I just want to say a few words about Bob Guile. We do this in Bob's memory. Bob was a character. In a time when the law was full of characters, there aren't many of them left, or perhaps there are too many lawyers around that the characters get buried. Bob came out of a generation with a group of people, many of whom are now retired or have passed away, and they had a lot of fun practicing law. Perhaps more fun than some of us have these days, but we find our fun in our own way. And he was born in 1932 in Prince George, and he passed away in 1994 at the age of 62, which seems awfully young. His widow passed away a couple of years ago, as did one of his sons. He's now survived by his daughter Virginia, his son Gregory, and his sister Janet, who we've introduced earlier. Bob had a distinguished career. He was a partner at Russell & Dumoulin, where I met him when I was an articling student and later as an associate and a partner. And I worked with Bob on a couple of matters. He was a bencher for many years. He achieved the position of Master Treasurer in 1990. However, with the passage of time, that office has been now renamed in accordance with the modern trend for uniformity. It's president. And I suppose that some thought that having the head of the Law Society called Master or Treasurer evoked too many images of lawyers taking wheelbarrows of cash home at the end of the day, which, if that's what you think it's all about, pop your balloon. Although I suppose in the early days, the treasurer was the guy who took care of the drinks. But that's lost in history. But Bob was also a very serious and scholarly lawyer. He had a good grasp of the law. He really enjoyed practicing law. But as I said, he liked to have fun. And his great friend, Tony Pantages QC, who passed away a year or two before him, were involved in an incredible number of stunts. And Bob and Tony and some of their cohorts, including Jerry, really wanted to be kind of like the Rat Pack. Now, I'm not talking about the Rat Pack of those that you hear about that runs around Hollywood these days. The original Rat Pack with Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and some other people. You can Google them if you don't know who I'm talking about. And they really were a Rat Pack. And Bob and Tony and those guys, they kind of liked to think they were a Vancouver Rat Pack. One of the things they did was they set up a group called SMALL, spelled with 5 small letters, not capitalized, standing for the Society of Midgets, Alliance of Little Lawyers. And fundamentally, it was a self-help group for short people with complexes. But they actively lobbied in the courthouse for booster seats and little boxes they could get up and stand on, so people, the judges, would realize they were not just hearing an echo in their hearing aids. And one of the pranks that Bob and Tony worked out one year was quite elaborate. They put together a completely bogus personal injury file. It involved correspondence between Bill Berardino QC at Russell & Dumoulin, who worked incredibly hard, who had been dealing with this chap for well over a year. And the poor plaintiff had been rendered quadriplegic, and Bill had issued a writ of summons to advance his claim for personal injury. And in fact, the plaintiff was so badly injured that he had to write his letters on a typewriter using a pen held in his teeth. Of course, there was no mention in the file how he managed to get the paper in or out of the typewriter, or how he could get the letters into an envelope. And the file also included a bogus writ of summons that had a registry stamp on it. This file appeared on Bill's desk as part of a pile of files that were being called up. What was interesting about it was that the writ was past the 1-year period, and writs expire after 1 year if they're not served. So word got around the firm that this had happened, and there was quite a crowd outside Bill's office as Bill was working his way through. And he got to this file and looked through it, and seeing that the writ hadn't been served and his client had possibly lost his claim because the limitation period expired, there was this huge yell, "Orlean!" was Bill's secretary, who kept things in order for Bill. But unfortunately, the prank couldn't go any further because the great crowd outside burst out into laughter, and at that point, Bill realized he'd been had. And he was involved in many pranks. Unfortunately, I can't tell you about some of them because modern standards of sensibility and decency preclude me describing what was considered boys being boys back in the old days. Another of Bob's talents was his skill at making things, and he made many trophies for Russell and Dummel, and we carry on that tradition here. You'll see there's some individual trophies, some of which may be awarded tonight, some may not. And in the past, we've been giving out these individual trophies to deserving recipients. And if you want to look at them over while the judges are deliberating, please feel free to do so. Bob had made trophies for Russell and Dummel for its ski event, and two of my favorites were his Miss Gate Award, which was a snowscape of a field with some trees and a pair of ski tracks that ran through a fence that was broken with it was a little picket fence, and there was a gate that had been missed, and that was the Miss Gate Award for a skier who had missed a gate. And his other was the Most Dangerous Skier Award, which was a glove impaled by the business end of a ski pole. And he had some other ones involving broken skis and so on, but he was very creative in that regard. And so the law is a very serious business, but there is room for fun, and occasionally you even have time to have a bit of humor in the courtroom. So going to the tryouts this year was kind of like buying a lottery ticket. I entered the tryouts with a great sense of hope and expectation, and tonight is the draw of the lottery, and we'll see whether or not we're happy or we have that crushing disappointment of yet another losing lottery ticket. The four debaters who appear tonight represent the stronger side of the bell curve, but I hope you won't be too disappointed. And for some of the competitors tonight, they may find this is the highlight of their legal career. Although a couple of years ago, I saw one law firm, there was a young lawyer in it who had actually put as a place of pride that he had won the Guile debate, and his firm thought that was a tremendous accomplishment. Obviously, they hadn't been here. So, tonight's resolution is an overspeaking judge is no well-tuned cymbal. That's an observation from an essay that Francis Bacon wrote of judicature. He wrote it 400 years ago. It's well worth reading. That comment will be debated by tonight, speaking for the resolution, Chris Thompson and he wasn't that good at the tryouts. And Zoe C. Speaking against the resolution, Will Shaw. great length, Grande. So the way it works is this. The first debater pro gets 7 minutes, and then we hear from the first debater con, who gets 7 minutes. Then the second debater pro gets 10, second debater con gets 10, and then each of the first debaters get 3 minutes for rebuttal. The judges will then retire to consider the verdict. The winner will receive an empty envelope with a promise of $1,000, the winners. The losers will also receive an empty envelope with a promise of $500. And the winner of the Best Individual Debater Award will receive another empty envelope with a promise of $250 in the future. So if you have any device, electronic or otherwise, that makes any sort of noise, with the one exception of the timing device that will control the speakers, please turn it off. And I now call upon Chris Thompson to begin the debate.
Can you guys hear me? All right. Honored judges, ladies, gentlemen, seeing eye dog, welcome. I am here to argue that an overspeaking judge is no well-tuned cymbal. The quote is from Francis Bacon, and we all know that nothing Bacon could ever be bad. Though Francis Bacon was a man who, at the age of 43, married a 14-year-old girl. Now, I never understood how a 43-year-old guy could hook up with a 14-year-old girl until I went to law games. Tony Oliver's secret is safe with me, don't worry. This quote stems from the early 1600s, when the cymbal had just been invented, when the profession of law was in its infancy, and when Professor Eliot had just started growing his mustache. Now, there are two reasons this is true. Number one, unlike an overspeaking judge, a well-tuned cymbal is pleasing to listen to. And number two, a well-tuned cymbal eventually shuts up on its own. But I think cymbals must have changed in the last 400 years, because you can't really tune a cymbal. But as Harper and Obama both know, you can tune Supreme Courts. I've written groan here, you guys are right into it. Now, some of you will be judges in the future, and I don't know whom I'll be offending here or if and when it'll come to bite me in the ass. And now I know exactly how Dimitri feels whenever he posts on Facebook. So what is overspeaking exactly? The answer is obvious. Judges should say enough to answer the question posed to them, and no more. Any intelligent male knows that you've got to answer difficult questions very precisely, and that even one extra word can sink you. An example. Honey, I have not had sexual relations with that woman. Yet. Damn. Judges have forgotten this. The median length of a US Supreme Court opinion has gone from 763 words in the late 1700s to 4,250 words today. If you extrapolate this trend back to the early 1600s before Bacon made his quote, judgments would have, on average, been about 2 words long. I think even today, this would be perfectly acceptable for the 6 possible positions a judge could take. Hell yes, fuck no. I agree, I disagree, and of course, missionary and doggy style. Today, the courts have gotten so wordy, Professor Duff got a happy birthday card from the BC Court of Appeal, and it came with a dissenting opinion. Not only are the judgments far too long, the judges also talk too much in court. Over a 20-year period ending in 2003, the US Chief Justices averaged about 133 questions per hour during submissions. This is worse than OCI's. Except Clarence Thomas. He hasn't said a word in 7 years. He's been asked why, and his answer, my colleagues should just shut up. which coincidentally is what I write on every teacher evaluation. Now, he must subscribe to Mark Twain's adage, better to keep one's mouth shut and be thought an idiot than to open it and remove all doubt. Now, if everyone followed this, there would be no more slander, no more religious conflict, and best of all, no more Fox News. Now, what exactly is overspeaking? If you have 1 minute of talking and try and fill 3 minutes of time, that's overspeaking. Well, around here, it's called advanced legal research and writing. Or, if it's 1 minute of angry yelling to fill 3 minutes of time, that's Occupy Rugby. Sorry, law students for fair allocation of LSS funding. Now, I have several cases that illustrate the difference between speaking and overspeaking. In a recent Alberta Court of Appeal case, the court wrote, "The respondent emerged from the driver's seat of the Jeep and approached the police car declaring, 'I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm so fucked.' As will be seen from our disposition of this appeal, that was a prophetic statement." See, that's all you need to know, and it's summed up in 2 words. He's fucked. On the other hand, consider the recent Supreme Court of Canada ruling of RVNS. The question was, when is it appropriate for a Muslim witness to cover her face with a niqab while testifying? Beverly McLaughlin, or as her friends call her, Big Mac, wrote, "The judge must assess the factors and determine whether, in the case at hand, the salutary effects of requiring the witness to remove the niqab outweigh the deleterious effects of doing so." Okay, that's not an answer. That's the question we asked you. You're the Supreme Court. You can't just rephrase the question, add 16,000 words, and expect us to be happy. This isn't Edinger's conflicts class. When is it appropriate to testify while covered? Rothstein and LaBelle wrote a great dissenting judgment saying, never. Perfect. Though I think this judgment just reinforces a very unfortunate stereotype. Women talk forever about nothing, and guys just like shouting, "Take it off, take it off." They said it. My final example is the family law divorce case of Bruni v. Bruni, also known as the paging Dr. Freud case. Here's an example of a judge who fills 10 pages of paper with 10 pages of gold. I'll give you an example. The judge quoted the defendant saying, "You put shit in this hand and shit in this hand, smack it together, what do you get? My son." The judge footnoted, "I gather this is the defendant's version of the Big Bang Theory." Gold. Here in North America, our judges drone on far too long. EU judgments are all around 4 pages, and we need to take more inspiration from our European neighbors. Now, I never thought I'd say that we need to be inspired by Europe unless I was referring to cars, booze, or attitudes towards monogamy, yet here we are. I would like to leave you with the following suggestion. If you're ever about to read a zillion-word decision that you know raises more questions than it answers, print it out, tape it to the wall, and slam your head repeatedly into it. The way I look at it, if my brain is going to hurt that much, I'd sooner do it to myself. Oprah calls that empowerment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I'm sure your application to clerk will be read with great interest. And now the first debater con, Will Shaw.
Don't start the time until I can get this thing lower. Is that gonna work? Can you guys hear me? Yeah. It's a change to do this sober this time. The law is verbose. This must not come as a surprise to anyone. It's impossible to say anything legal in less than 1,000 words, 100 clauses, 50 acts, or 3 very expensive textbooks, all of which were conveniently written by the professor teaching the class. But this is important. This provides precision, or at least it provides the right amount of imprecision that lets us have jobs. If everything was precise and clear-cut, then we could get by with a fraction of the lawyers that we have today. An overspeaking judge is no well-tuned cymbal? I disagree. Overspeaking judges are the drums by which we march. Thanks, Mike. Ask any lawyer trying to make their billables, and they will tell you that an overspeaking judge is a fine instrument. The time the judge spends talking is time that the lawyer can bill to the client. And the judge is either proving the lawyer's case or giving grounds for an appeal. If judges sat back in court and didn't get involved and then delivered short, pithy decisions, then we as lawyers would have to take on more cases to reach our billables and would have to work harder and faster to live the luxurious lifestyle that we all got into this business for. If you think that we have problems with substance abuse now, try adding speed to the mix and see how it works out. Before long, it would be considered substance abuse not to use cocaine. What I think this comes down to is a matter of tradition. Let's not forget that we are the heirs to a legal system that needed 29 pages to determine the meaning of the word person and whether or not this applied to women. In fact, I was delighted to see that when I Googled that particular case, one of the first search results was an offer to translate the decision into English. That, my friends, is a well-written decision. But it could not have been any shorter, because it is a judicial tradition that the only thing better than more words are maxims taken from a dead language. It's no wonder that I'm the one to stand up for tradition, for the conservative traditions of our legal system. My friend Mr. Grande is of Aboriginal descent, while my friend Miss C is of Asian Canadian descent, both groups that have their own legal cultures and legal histories. I must confess that I don't know the history behind the mad scientist experiment that produced Mr. Gargantuan, but I can only assume that it involves several members of the great apes and a speak and say. And in any case, it's no wonder that he would be the one to advocate for shorter, simpler decisions. And then there's me, white, Anglo-Saxon, male, upper middle class, Oxbridge educated, and wearing gowns over a tuxedo. All I'm missing is a wig, and I could be here discussing the merits of a carbolic smoke ball. But this does not mean that I am adverse to breaking with traditions. I was delighted when Miss C was selected for the finals in this debate. She thereby gained access to what has been, in my time at law school, an old boys club, and in some cases very old. And then I thought, what do I know about Miss C? I was surprised that she was in favor of this motion. I've seen the cute little cartoons that she posted about her time in law school, and I thought, what is a picture but 1,000 words? Now, I grant that some of the artwork might have only been worth a few hundred words, but nevertheless, she's compiled a lengthy anthology during her time here, and surely someone with so much to say would not want to deny that freedom of expression to the judiciary. While some traditions should rightly be abandoned, some traditions are rightly going strong. I think I have the weight of the Supreme Court of Canada behind me when I say that judges must be able to speak at great length. From my calculations, Chief Justice McLaughlin, Big Mac, her judgments are single-handed attempts to revitalize the forest industry by spanning hundreds of pages. Consider the case that my friend Mr. Thompson brought up of the woman seeking the right to testify in traditional clothing that would hide her face during trial. Asked whether the woman had the right, Chief Justice McLaughlin needed 24 pages to answer, maybe. Even better, Justice LaBelle needed another 10 pages to say, I agree, maybe. These are the Supreme Court justices of our country. This is the pinnacle of judicial reasoning that we have to deal with. If they got where they are by overspeaking, who are we to question the value our legal system places on long-windedness? To support this motion is short-sighted. Sure, as law students, we all want judges to be short and to the point. Less time spent studying means more free time to complain about time spent studying. Hell, we might say that an overspeaking law professor is no well-tuned cymbal, and that's a motion I would gladly support for a few of the professors here. Thank you guys for attending. But overspeaking is the cornerstone of the judge's work, and it is in our interests. We want the law to take longer. Why bill the client for a 3-hour trial when you can bill them for 3 weeks? At the end of it, if the judge hands down a 3-paragraph judgment, do you think your client will feel they got value for money? I would argue that you should never hand the client a legal document that is not at least 50 pages long. Even if it's just a printout of an email. Add another 49 pages of legal disclaimer, confidentiality agreements, or hell, if you have to, excerpts from the law faculty's weekly emails. No one's gonna read that. In fact, if the client receives a short judgment, there's a very real danger that they will actually read it for themselves, instead of paying us to do so. What's even scarier is that they may understand it. And then where are we? If we pull back the veil and grant clients access to justice without us as intermediaries, we might just knock ourselves out of business. The overspeaking judge is our job security. especially if they can use big words like paramountcy, estoppel, mens rea, or contra proferentum. In fact, Microsoft Word tells me that none of these are actually words. The last of these pseudo-words, contra proferentum, may be of particular interest to one of the more distinguished members of our judges panel here tonight, for it was crucial in the recent case of Jackson and the Standard Life Assurance. In that case, the Honorable Chief Justice Finch managed to deliver a 47-paragraph decision on the plain meaning of a single sentence in an employment agreement. Counsel for the appellant, a QC counsel no less, had the nerve to argue that the plain meaning of the words in the contract were not difficult to understand. If that's the case, then I would submit that the contract was poorly written. Honorable Chief Justice Finch, I come to praise you, not to bury you. For it is in decisions such as these that I see a safe future for lawyers. The more words judges use, the more grounds we have for appeals. The lengthier the precedent we have to sift through, the more chance we may find justification for whatever harebrained argument we are trying to make. All of these are things that we may charge to the client. I'm right at the end. A few extra hours of court time here and there spent listening to the judge overspeak could be the difference between a Mazda and a Maserati, or between a condo and a house, or between one divorce and two. So to the judges here today, and to the students that will one day find themselves with a gavel in hand and a captive audience before them, speak on, I say. Don't mince your words, celebrate them. Thank you.
It's nice to hear a debater who lives up to his principles. All right, the second debater pro is Zoe C.
Yeah, this is not going to work. Oh, no, we're good, we're good. Okay. All right, okay, we're good. Okay. Okay. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored judges, in case you didn't catch the tryouts or the intro, my name is Zoe. I represent the tiny half of Team Pro debaters. At first I thought that teaming up with Chris would be a bit too obvious a visual gag for a humorous debate, but he insisted it was a way of keeping things equitable and making sure that both teams contained at least one big guy and one little girl. I'm very happy and very honored to be speaking to all of you tonight, not least because making it to the final round of anything automatically means I get to pass it off as a serious academic achievement on my resume. Law school debate finalist also just sounds so impressive to med students, especially considering how low everybody's standards are at those med law parties. This is also only the second time in my life I've gotten to wear a Snuggie in public. And it's the fucking best. Judges, you really got it figured out. The best way, clearly, to maximize job satisfaction is to have a uniform that is essentially a huge soft blanket with sleeves. But anyway, I digress. I'm here today, I'm gonna push this back a tiny bit, to talk about a problem that's been plaguing the long, illustrious, and cozy careers of judges for centuries. That an overspeaking judge is no well-tuned cymbal. To put the resolution in plainer terms, since no one actually seems to understand what it means that a judge who speaks too much is analogous to an instrument that is broken, in that both produce no useful sounds. And I agree with this. In law school and in practice, we champion clear and succinct speaking and writing. Judges' tendencies to blather on in their written judgments is not only an inefficient way to communicate the law, it has disastrous effects on law students everywhere. We all know the feeling. It's the first week of 1L, and you're all aggressively Instagramming photos of your giant shrink-wrapped textbooks, maybe even looking forward to learning something. things take a turn about 5 months in when you realize that the only way to get through 209 paragraphs of Delgamook is to periodically crawl under a blanket and weep into a box of wine. And then drink all of it. But since 1L, for each monstrous judgment I've had to read, there's probably a corresponding gross wine stain somewhere in my apartment. But anyway, now that UBC Law has a wine appreciation society, I can at least be pretty sure that I'm not alone, so. And I think it's safe to say that we have overly verbose judges to blame for all of this. Judges, you only need 20 words tops to convey literally anything. Anyone who's read a Jen Lau can knows this. Jen Lau can fit the meaning of life onto a Post-it note. To be fair, that takes 42 words instead of 20, but if you saw it, she would have to kill you. That's an aside. But if that's true, why do judges still need hundreds of paragraphs to make a single point? First of all, judges tend to repeat themselves within judgments. Reading cases is a lot like reading the label on a peanut can that says, "Peanuts, caution, may contain peanuts." Like, maybe you think we're idiots, or maybe you're just trying to cover your own asses. But either way, it's annoying as fuck. They also tend to copy and paste entire sections verbatim from previous judgments into their current judgments to try to prove a point. In court, that's called precedent. In law school land, that's called plagiarism. Interestingly enough, a couple years ago, a BC judge's trial decision was overturned in the Court of Appeal when it was found that he'd copied 321 paragraphs of the plaintiff's submissions directly into his own judgment. In the appeal court's words, none of the parties was fairly treated by his failure to properly grapple with the case. I guess when you get to wear Snuggies to work, you tend to assume that you don't have to deal with all that grappling shit. But this goes to show that even judges need to learn the value of paraphrasing. Judges also enjoy being very poetic, and the law tends to get lost in the process. In the 1997 Supreme Court of Canada decision, R.V. Lithgus, Justice Corey analogizes the presumption of innocence and proof beyond a reasonable doubt to gold and silver threads. He says they are, and I quote, "forever as closely linked as Romeo with Juliet or Oberon with Titania, and they will be forever intertwined in the fabric of criminal law." Okay, like, I don't know about you, but when I hear forever, Romeo and Juliet, and intertwined in the same sentence, I just assume it's a drunk former English lit major / 1L making a super weak pass at me. And judges, I feel like you're taking yourselves a bit too seriously if you're pulling Shakespeare out of your asses for a crim law case. Like, just chill out. Look, I can understand the appeal of being in a position in which you can talk as much as you want about whatever you want and get away with it. I imagine it's how David Duff feels every day when he's doing it 6.5 minutes after the end of tax class. That said, I strongly believe that anyone who tries hard enough is fully capable of making reasoned and concise judgments. Take me, for example. Every year, when I watch the Victoria's Secret fashion show, I am faced with the question, will buying this crap make me a 6-foot-tall, outlandishly well-endowed young woman? After a brief consideration of the facts, I come to a conclusion and issue my judgment, which is no. And that took me like 5 seconds. So how can we remedy this egregious long-windedness? To help the judiciary think outside the box and break free from stuffy, old-fashioned writing styles, we should seek creative, contemporary, and collaborative solutions. We can start by having at least one judgment this year produced in the style of a Call Me Maybe cover. Hey, I just met you, and you are crazy. So here's your sentence, don't call me ever. Or instead of letting judges type out their judgments, we could restrict them to a box of sexual fridge magnet poetry. So the deal is that judicial reasons would have to fit onto a fridge door and would be required to contain the words fuzzy, delicious, and moist. When was the last time you read a judgment that had moist in it? That's what I thought. In exchange for the judge's credibility, we get shorter, snappier, and sexier judgments. I'm always down for that. So, While we're fixing things, why not go ahead and transform judgments into actual engaging learning tools? So in addition to a 10-page limit, judgments could be written to subtly pander to the interests of the average law student. As such, they would include gratuitous references to zombies, HBO, and Grumpy Cat. Appendices would feature adorable clip art from Tony Shepard's PowerPoint slides. Right beside photos of a shirtless Ryan Gosling lifting heavy objects and calling you girl. And got the ladies' vote. So to sum up, an overspeaking judge is indeed no well-tuned cymbal. Judges overspeak, and it's unpleasant. However, it is not a law of nature. Judges, I assure you, you can change. All it takes is practice. So the next time you're at a bar and someone catches your eye, I implore you to do not follow your instinct to channel Justice Corey and start blabbing on about Romeo and Juliet and intertwined threads of splendid gold and silver. I would encourage you instead to channel the immortal words of Andre 3000 and just get straight to the point. Girl, I don't want to meet yo daddy. I just want you in my caddy. Thank you.
I would hate to see Zoe's fridge. And now the second debater con, the elderly Glenn Grande.
So you're not supposed to put this on a resume? Yeah? Okay, all right. Well, thanks for the opportunity. With so much of the legal community here tonight, and colleagues and friends, this is a really, really good way to end a career. The official story of the death of Sir Francis Bacon, who is the author of this great resolution, is that he was riding in his carriage on a snowy London day in April in 1626, and he stopped to pay a poor farm woman to kill it and dress a fowl so he could stuff it with snow and test his theory of refrigeration. Days later, he died of pneumonia. But our team's highly imaginary, skilled interns have unearthed never-before-seen documents that tell the real story. So I want you to close your eyes. Go ahead, close your eyes. It's okay. If you feel a hand on your leg, it's probably Dan Wood. But, hang on. He's down east. Is that far enough away? Okay. All right, you're all safe. Close your eyes. Hi, Dan. So imagine a duck, a goose. No, wait. Make it a rooster. That's it. A rooster. A rooster named Lance. Poor old cock, Lance. Banished from the farm at the end of his service. Battle-scarred, missing some tails, feathers, and hobbling over cobblestones, and his half-gibbled strut and his pigeon-toed prance. And he's struggling down a snow-dusted London lane in 1626, and he starts back with a terrified "Gah!" at a buggy bearing down on him at speed, but drawn by a team of two-legged boy rugby mules, not the more civilized four-legged steeds. Sporting high-buckled cleats and their short pantaloons and frilly black frocks with the large letter B. Not for beaver, but B as in bacon. For whether or not you are a bacon believer, this story is true. And some of that crew were pulling old Frank Bacon, the silencer of judges, that middle-aged pederast in an underage marriage who'd taken all of law hostage, having sweet Lady Justice herself bound in the boot of his ex-chancellor carriage. Well, once the commandante of the whole justice system, with power over every case and sentence and docket, meanwhile, behind the scenes, he was subverting the entire legal system by keeping most of England in his back bacon pocket. His need was pressing, substantial and dire, and Frankie's fat was deep in the fat fryer because must needs I, he sneered, to silence justice once and for all and keep her pesky judges quiet. For if they ever put the screws to me, I'm sure to carry on too long, and the litany of my confessions would start a national riot. So from the cab of the wagon he squawked a decree. Halt, you mules! 'Tis there a foul thing I see. For reasons divine, God hath sent a rooster to cock-block my path. And if I apply my legal scientific mind and do the math, well, it's plain to see. This errant chicken is my way out. Yes, another bacon stroke of genius to restore my magisterial clout. And he called to his largest and most compliant mule, Thompson, unharness the team. Get that scrum in order down there, son. There's dirty cock abduction work here needs to be done. The perfect catalyst to hide the true depth of my vice. I'll catch it. Well, you'll catch it. Kill it, dress it, stuff it, bring it back with enough snow to turn its carcass into solid cock ice. And if that frozen bird can last on my root cellar shelf, well, I'll use this cold science to freeze justice herself. So in a frenzy of frilly shirts and short pantaloons, Thompson loosed the unlawful pack of cock-crazy goons. Bacon skilleted out of the cab and slithered to the back of the buggy, and he popped open the boot, stroked his goatee, and leered at his victim, the once mighty goddess, gagged and frightened and shivering like every other casualty of cock-a-bacon dictum. Maybe I won't freeze you just yet. Perhaps, he wheezed, I will invoke Baconian matrimonium and make you marry me. I'll force you to take my name, and all the world will tremble when I file that most uncivil claim. Instead of let justice be done, let bacon be done. But first, let's have a little fun. A sudden tempest distracted him, brewing down past the mews. It was old Henhouse Lance. He was putting the screws to the whole mule squad, teaching those boys some old school plays out on the pitch and some new applications and uses for sod. Sizzling, bacon, spattered a curse at the scrum. You idiots, you've lost the plot! And ran to help in his flimsy trot, his favorite mode of conveyance. Suddenly, time and space froze around the tram. A terrifying supernatural black hole opened like a Duff tax exam. A pair of time-traveling law students shot in from the future, a young mano with hair and a bald mano, and they grabbed Justicia, and they beamed her back with them to 2013 to a pub in Kitsilano. But this part of the story has yet to be proved. There's evidence indicating for the first time in history this law goddess had her blindfold removed. The end of year Friday night, at the Wolf and Hound, she saw the painful sting of first light, heard many voices and discordant pub sounds. What color are they? I don't know, they keep changing. Get her some water. Green, blue, maybe brown. Is that Aristotle's daughter? No, she don't need her daddy's name. That's the Roman one, Athena. No, you idiot. She's Greek. No, that's a rebel, Ruth. Well, whatever. They're shades of truth. And her skin, man, it's too pale for a Sacagawea or a Kalima or a Mulan, but hey, we bought her some time. Maybe she can go work on that tan. Now, who are you guys, she asked. Where am I? In a voice like an ocean dawn on a sweet morning tide. Oh, relax, said the law students. We're just on your side. I was kidnapped, frozen, she said, unable to see a thing. Yeah, we know, right? English law? It had a crazy spring. Thank you, but I got to put the blindfold back on. I'm blind, Lady Justice. Actually, we're discharging you, but at your discretion, trust us. We bought you a ticket for a long plane ride. We etched your old likeness in wood as a reminder. We think we got your good side. Think of it like an ironic witness protection program. After the bacon ordeal, we got worried you'd lose in the court of human appeal. And as they toasted to her emancipated justiceness, something new spread across the law. Innocuous things at first. One day, Pam Sear found a pair of brand new knee guards on her desk. Margot Young looked up from her unpacking and just gave it a rest. Ben Gould made a friend. ITG was spotted again. The curve stretched and flattened and almost disappeared for a while. Ben Perrin remembered where he left his smile. Carrie Simmons and Craig Dennis had awards named after themselves and recognized each other. Bruce LaRose stood one day at a committee and offered a chair to another. Practitioners taught their first engaging class. UBC discovered the all-purpose parking pass. The Law Cafe got a real earn, and Grande finally realized he came here to learn. The old Rooster Lance must have taught the ancient Beaver some respect, because the subsequent teams let the Honey Badgers run an event. The law students figured out how to manage the week, and everyone, including judges, was just free to speak. And as the Lady Justice Freedom Party bell rang last call, the archaeologists found the furnace in Allard Hall. But what of Pale Justitia, our gentle goddess of truth? Well, man, she did the full Shirley Valentine. Look it up. And last appeared in a snapshot in a YVR photo booth, sporting shades and a ticket to Tahiti. She got pedicured and pampered and burned out a brand new pair of shoes, kicking it up with her new friends, packed her favorite swimsuit and her most beloved books, and man, she looked great. After shedding 147 pounds of ugly bacon fat and tossing that old glad rag in the can, she's getting served red wine somewhere on warm white sands, enjoying a well-deserved leave of indefinite absence, getting lots of time to work on that tan.
I think Shakespeare wrote a play about that presentation. It's called Much Ado About Nothing. Now, we now have the first of the rebuttal speakers, Chris Thompson, who will have 3 minutes to speak for the pro side.
So, when I was writing the rebuttal, I realized that Will, well, really just insulted me for 7 minutes. And Glenn somehow talked about something, anything, everything, and really nothing all at the same time. So I just like to say that even if you can beat him, join him. Glenn, this is for you. There was never a trial that quite matched the Guile for its rhetoric, theater, and wit, with the judges and teachers and students and bleachers about whom we should not talk shit. Should not don't. The truth we are seeking is that a judge overspeaking is indeed no well-tuned cymbal. Will had his time and Glenn had his rhyme, but comparatively our arguments were more nimble. From the man Will Shaw and his cavernous maw, from which nothing but insults came, and his partner Glenn Grande, whose arguments no one can understand, and whose imagery makes Dan Wood seem tame. They stood in this place, they looked you in the face, and they talked about obiter and laws. And I know that their plan was to fool you and the man, but it's plain their argument has flaws. They can drone on all night about how judges are right to talk on and on about stuff. But if you ask me, it's easy to see that their arguments are all mirrors and fluff. But it's not my position that in every decision all judges write crap all the time. For when the Honorable Lance himself takes a stance, to ignore it would be a crime. For when you look at the facts, on judges wax and sometimes use far too much zeal. And those times when they do, problems often accrue, and cases end up overturned on appeal. And my opposing cohort, one tall and one short, have done their best to defend. But judges aren't suckers. They're smart, mother-loving individuals who will see through your tricks in the end. Thank you.
And now the final speaker, Will Shaw, who has 3 minutes to speak for the con side.
If my opponents truly believed that overspeaking had no place in the law, then they would have delivered their arguments in a pithy sentence or two. But no, they spoke for as long as we would let them, just as judges are wont to do. Do you think that my friend and partner could have delivered effective arguments via haiku? No. Nothing short of epic poetry will satisfy Lady Justice. Ladies and gentlemen, we have heard the reasoned arguments of 4 individuals tonight. Be it Miss C's slanderous speculations as to my gender, And I will have you know that Moist last appeared in a judgment less than a month ago in Ontario in 6337 Beatarian. The internet on the phone is a wonderful thing these days. Or be it Mr. Grande's Griffin Prize-worthy submissions. That's Canada's top prize for poetry. Mr. Thompson's sophisticated grunting, or my own humble appeal to tradition. We have all sought to persuade you. But before you make your minds up, I would urge you to consider the consequences of a decision either way. What do my learned friends seek by muzzling justice? Are they so conditioned by law school that they must attach a word limit to judicial decisions? If we overthrow the tyranny of the judge, what unknown tyranny might take its place? Better the beast we know. I also understand that judges may see some negative consequences in accepting my position and rejecting this proposal. My noble opponent may become angered and break off the shackles of decorum. He might abduct his sympathetic partner and flee downtown, where, confused by the bright lights, he might climb the Shangri-La and, seeking to protect his noble partner from the pesky harbor airplanes buzzing about, may fall to his doom. While this remains a very real danger, it is one we must accept for the sake of justice. But no, there must be no danger that our noble judges being silenced by this insidious threat. What judge would pass their own death sentence? What group of individuals whose job it is to give verdicts, to literally speak the truth in justice, would approve a resolution designed to prevent them from doing so? Perhaps they might be seduced by the opportunity to be able to hand down 2-word judgments, as Mr. Thompson recommends, leaving them more time for golf, bridge, scrapbooking, tennis, or whatever else my respectful opponents assume these honorable judges will do with more free time. To this I say no. Do not be so lazy, and do not allow laziness to develop in those who will come after you. If you have not been persuaded by my appeal to tradition, please be persuaded by my appeal to spite. Throughout my entire law school career, I have had to deal with overspeaking decisions. I'm not saying I read them, but I had to deal with the guilt of knowing that they were there to be read. If judges begin to deliver short decisions, then future students will have no reason not to read these decisions. It doesn't bother me that they will emerge as better lawyers than me. What bothers me is that they will emerge without the burden of guilt. Honorable judges, I ask you to think back to your own time in law school. Time? All right. I'm sure you still feel the same spite that I do. As I face my final semester in these hallowed halls, I am comforted to know that future students will be as bitter as I am. In conclusion, this motion cannot stand. An overspeaking judge is no well-tuned cymbal? No, I say, let the band play on.
We'll now take a break while the judges retire to consider their verdicts.
Just a couple of observations. Thank you, debaters all, very much for a most entertaining afternoon. I have to offer a word or two of my own about judges overspeaking. But I just like you to know that I have a few short, snappy interventions when counsel are going on too much. One of them is stop. Another one is enough already. And if I really want to wax eloquent, I say, oh, for heaven's sake. On the judgment side of it, the good one, the best judgment of all is you win, you lose. But litigants often don't find that satisfying. We're told in judgment writing school that one of the purposes of reasons is so that the losing litigant can understand why he or she is lost. And sometimes the loser, there's so many reasons why. Where do you start, eh? Okay. We have had a very collegial group of judges. I've been instructed by your chairperson that we are to announce the best team at the end of the list of other awards. And so I will tell you, and these, I assure you, these are all unanimous decisions. all reached by a very few votes. Only on one. The most timorous debater. The debater who shied away from controversy and played it safe. Grande. Rebuttal Award. The debater who was the most vulgar and off-color. Thompson. We're told there's a special prize this year, the All-Obiter Prize, for the most irrelevant remark. This goes to the debater who said something about Victoria's Secret.
The most irrelevant remark prize is donated by the All-Obiter Club at the law school, which is probably a group that are looking for another occupation. It's remarkable that the person who is most off topic gets a $50 prize.
And finally, on the individual awards, the Best Debater Award, Will Shaw.
Whose firm is very generously donating the prize. It also goes a little trophy, and those of you who have been here in debates in the past may recall that a couple of times we've given out the Most Dangerous Speaker Award. It's described as the south end of a northbound horse. The Best Debater Award, this is the RBS Best Debater Award, is of course the north end of the northbound horse. So,
I told Richard we ought to call this the least bad debater award. Richard quickly said, well look, if we call it the best debater award, imagine what we'll save on engraving costs. Genius.
Finally, we have to announce the best team, and whereas every other award was reached by unanimous decision, this one comes with a dissent. The vote was 6-1. The best team is the con team, Messrs. Shaw and Grande. Yeah, my learned colleague, Lacoban, will deliver the dissent.
This device to illustrate that mine is an enlightened opinion. As far as I am concerned, and as the sole remaining member of Small, the best team was undoubtedly Mr. Shaw and Miss C. I sized them up immediately.